Yet again a privilege to be here with you all, and obviously with you wherever you may be throughout the continent of Africa and beyond. Today we're talking about a very special topic: guard your heart. The one thing I know is that everybody here and everybody listening and watching has a heart. My name, as has been said, is Dr. Chidi, and we have been going through some of the colors of this Life Colors program. Each color represents a different disease that we're able to help people reverse. Now, in my first one, we talked about diabetes and obesity, the blue and the purple. Today, we're going to be talking about the red and the orange, which is, of course, the heart. But before I go into it, because Pastor Finley was talking to us yesterday about World War I just thought I'd just share something with you. I wonder if anybody recognizes this building. Does anybody recognize this building? It is the Tower of London. And if you see all of those, the red, the sea of red around it, those were 880,000 ceramic poppies that were planted as an art installation. They were planted back in 2014 because it was the 100-year anniversary, the centenary from the start of the First World War. Many people lost their lives. 880,000 men and women lost their lives from Great Britain. That's why they were installed. During the time, the President of the United States said, look, when the war is over, I think we should all come together so that we don't go to war again. He came up with this idea of the League of Nations. That was mentioned yesterday by Pastor Finley. And all the Europeans said, yes, we want to be part of the League of Nations, let's get involved. But when Woodrow Wilson went back to the United States, he couldn't convince the Americans to be part of the League of Nations. He wanted them to be part because he thought, look, the Europeans, they're going to take it out on the Germans, and the Americans will just calm them down a bit. So he said, look, I'm going to go around the United States, and I'm going to convince the Americans to join the League of Nations. Sadly, he had a stroke. He was unable to do anything. In fact, they say that his wife was the first female president of the United States. So what happened is that the Europeans treated the Germans like second-class citizens. They really punished them for what they did in the war. And then, of course, this gentleman came along and said, no, we're not second-class citizens. We're going to rule for 1,000 years. I always wonder, if Woodrow Wilson never had a stroke, if he was able to convince the Americans to join the League of Nations, and the Europeans didn't punish the Germans so severely, I wonder if there would have been space for this man to rise up. You see, our individual health is not just about our own health. It affects our loved ones. It can affect our communities. It can affect our country, it can affect the continent of Africa and beyond. Many people say to me, Dr. Chidi, yeah, I know, I hear what you say, but it's my body, I'll do what I want. Well, that's true, you can do what you want with your body. But when you get sick, who has to look after you? It's your family, it's your loved ones. No man, no woman is an island. We all are interrelated to each other, and that's why we're doing these talks. We want to free people to have freedom in their health, freedom in their families, freedom in the world. So, let's talk about what's next. Guard your heart. That's the whole topic. Now look, your heart starts to beat at about 6 weeks when you're in the womb. 6 weeks. And when it beats, it doesn't stop beating until you die. 60,000 miles of vessels you have in your bodies. The blood is moving at about 60 miles an hour. Did you know that? You probably didn't realize you're traveling so fast. All that is happening to get blood and nutrition to all of the tissues of the body. It goes into one side of the heart, gets oxygenated, goes out, and gets pumped out to all the regions of the body. But in Africa, you know, back in the 1950s, they decided to do a study on heart disease globally. They actually came to Kenya in the 1950s to look at heart disease. I tell you what they found. They found almost no heart disease in Kenya in the 1950s. Today, however, it's a different matter. Today, it's a different matter. We have almost 30% of people suffering from hypertension. If you can believe this statistic, about 60% of people are suffering from pre-hypertension, meaning that they're probably going to get high blood pressure in the next 10 days. What on earth has been going on? Well, heart disease is a big deal. It's when your arteries around your body start to close up, and we're going to look at why that happens. Why on earth do we get it? Is it genetic? I hear this question all the time. In fact, many doctors will tell you if you've got heart disease, it's because it's in the genes. Well, that's not quite right. If they tell you that, the first thing you should ask them is, have they discovered the gene for heart disease? They haven't found it yet. Have they discovered the gene for high blood pressure? They haven't found it yet. It's not really about the genes, it's more about our lifestyles. If we inherit something, it's the lifestyle. So I always say, don't blame your parents for your heart condition. You know, the Garden of Eden tells us a lot about blame, doesn't it? God blamed Adam, Adam blamed Eve, Eve blamed the serpent, and of course the serpent didn't have a leg to stand on. That probably doesn't translate well to many of you who don't know English, but those of you who know, you know. Look, let me talk about heart disease. What are the first signs of heart disease? The first signs of heart disease. Look, even before I left medical school, there is no way you can qualify as a doctor if you didn't know the first signs of a heart attack. Chest pain, radiating to your neck, sweating, vomiting, all that sort of problem. But I always say, go way before that. What is the first sign of heart disease? It's this sort of lifestyle. It's if you are inactive, if you have a poor diet, if you're stressed all the time, if you're overweight, if you're smoking and if you're drinking, if you're doing these things and you don't have a diagnosis, I can guarantee inside your body you have heart disease already. Now, I have a colleague and a friend who I worked with many years ago, but he's a pioneer of heart disease reversal. What he did, he took a group of patients, all having severe heart disease, meaning that they're getting chest pains, they're getting strokes, all sorts of things, brought them into his home, and all he did was give them a healthy plant-based diet, no oils, no dairy, no sugar. I should say, of these 18 people, up to this event, they had between them 49 cardiac events, meaning a stroke, chest pain, angina, in the 8 years before the experiment. By just changing the diet, what he found was immediately, within weeks, the cholesterol levels came down. Within weeks, they were getting no symptoms at all. In fact, he followed them up for 11 years after. There were no cardiac events, just by changing the diet to a healthy plant-based diet. Let me show you some of the results here. This is the before and after of an angiogram. We inject people with a dye, it goes to the heart, and we can look at what the arteries look like. In the before, you can see that little kink in the artery. That's where the artery is closing down and it can't open up, and that's what's causing you the chest pain and can cause a heart attack. In the after, it looks completely normal. Let me tell you, I spent 6 months at Cambridge Hospital. It's called Papworth. It's one of the foremost hospitals for heart disease in the world. And I spent every day doing 3 bypass in the heart. 3. Now, if I came to my colleagues and I showed them the before and after and it looked like that, they would say, Chidi, well done. Great operation. Wonderful. But this was not an operation. This is the before and the after of people changing their diet. Now, let me ask you the question. What would you prefer? To have somebody like me open up your chest, stop your heart, take out some arteries, replace them, put you on physiotherapy for several months with pain and suffering and medication, or would you just rather change your diet? I think most people would just rather change their diet. It is a miracle. Even today, it's still not being taught in medical schools, but it's an absolute miracle that we can reverse heart disease just by diet. Just by diet. Look that up, because it's a wonderful study. Because what we're doing is actually bringing the arteries back to how they actually should be. You see, heart disease starts very young and very early. There was a famous war, the Vietnam War. The average age of the soldiers was 19. When they were killed and they were brought back to America, they did autopsies on their bodies. These 19-year-olds already had severe heart disease at 19. And it obviously gets worse. We know that even children start to have fatty streaks in their arteries because of what we're giving them to eat. Guard your heart. Look, one of the most important things with heart disease is high blood pressure. And in the UK, and I think globally, about a third of people have high blood pressure. Now, what we like to aim for is a systolic, the top number, of 120 and the lower number of 80. It does not matter how old you are. Do not believe them when they say, oh, it should go up with age. That is not true. It should be maximum 120 over 80 throughout your life. But why do we get high blood pressure? And we know it's not genetic. We know we don't go for that falsehood. But look, if you go to your doctor will tell you 95% of high blood pressure is essential. Now, what does that mean? You know, let me let you into a secret about doctors. When we don't understand something, we give it a long name and it makes us sound important. So when they say essential hypertension, what they mean is we don't know what causes high blood pressure. So 95% is essential hypertension, the doctors don't know. But they will tell you what are the risk factors for high blood pressure and strokes. You've probably heard all of this. Family history of high blood pressure, if you're African or Caribbean, if you're male or female after the menopause, obese, diabetic, if you smoke, if you have high salt in your diet, if you're stressed all the time, or if you do not exercise, a sedentary lifestyle. We know that those are the risk factors. Well, look, it doesn't take a genius to understand that the risk factors are actually the causes. Those risk factors lead to heart disease and high blood pressure. And the thing is, if you have more than one, they multiply your risk. They don't just add, they multiply your risk. So if you smoke, you're overweight, and you're stressed, your risk multiplies many, many times. But some of those risk factors don't seem fair, do they? Let's go back to them. Family history of hypertension, we've dealt with that. Look, does that mean if my mother and father had high blood pressure, I have to get high blood pressure? Absolutely not. We've said it's lifestyle that really determines our health and our longevity. What about Afro-Caribbean? Do we have any Afro-Caribbeans? Any people from Africa or the Caribbean watching here? Yes, we have quite a few. Why should it be that Africans have higher blood pressure than everybody else? Why should that be? That doesn't seem fair. Now, when I ask people, they say, oh, maybe it's because of slavery or we have a harder life. Well, no, that's not true. The answer is quite simple. The reason why Africans have a high blood pressure is because we come from hot climates. That's why our skin is dark. And because we perspire, we need to hold on to water a little bit more than Caucasians. So our bodies hold on to salt a little bit more, and where salt goes, water follows. So because we hold on to salt more, and then we have a wonderful Western diet which is riddled with salt, we become much more sensitive to salt, and our blood pressure rises more than everybody else. But the good news is you just simply have to eat less salt. If you eat less salt, your risk goes down. Now, what about the third one? Why are men having higher blood pressure than women? Well, the answer is always obvious, because men have to live with women. Isn't that the answer? No? Okay. All right, maybe not. Okay. No, the real answer is that women have this hormone estrogen in their system, and up until the menopause, it actually lowers the blood pressure. After menopause, the blood pressure goes up just like everybody else. So those are the unfair or the seemingly unfair issues. Yesterday, Sister Finley was talking about water. Water is essential for lowering blood pressure. I must say I thoroughly I took notes from yesterday's talk. I thoroughly enjoyed that talk. Water absolutely is one of the cheapest, simplest ways to lower blood pressure. Let me explain why. Anybody love swimming here? Anybody love swimming? Okay, right. More Caucasian hands up than Africans. That makes sense. You see, the continent of Africa, we excel in middle distance running, right? We do. We win all. I mean, it's rare that an African doesn't win a middle distance or a long distance race. I'm yet to see an Olympic swimmer coming from the continent of Africa, maybe sometime soon. But let me explain something. Imagine trying to swim in a swimming pool filled with honey. Can you imagine that? Swimming in honey. Imagine how hard it would be. I mean, it would probably take you a week to do a length. You'd be exhausted because it's so thick. You'd have to use so much force. Well, imagine your blood becomes thicker. The thicker your blood becomes, the more effort your heart will have to do to push it through the system. Now, what makes the blood thick? Low amounts of water. What do you have to do? Drink more water, your blood pressure comes down almost immediately. Almost immediately. That's the power of water. Okay. Now, hypertension is described as a disease. I look at it as a warning sign. Because if your blood pressure is going up, it's telling you that there are lots of things under the hood that are getting worse. So things like cancer, that's going to be caused by the stress hormones, Alzheimer's disease, anxiety, depression, irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease. All of these are bigger problems down the line if you don't deal with your high blood pressure, because your high blood pressure can be caused by stress, and those stress hormones, even if you get the right pill to lower your blood pressure, they're not going to deal with the cancer, they're not going to deal with the Alzheimer's. Let me show you this picture just to give you an example of what I'm talking about. This is a picture of my first car. My first car. It actually still looks quite good. That's not the actual car. My car looked a lot worse than that. I scraped up all the money I could get to purchase this car. When I purchased it, I didn't have enough money for petrol after. That was all my money. So when I started to drive it, and the warning lights were going off, I had no money to fix the car. So I just had to keep on driving. More warning lights came up. Then one day, steam came out of the engine, the car stopped. It became incredibly expensive for me to deal with. That's how I think about high blood pressure. It's a warning sign that something worse is coming down the line. And it demonstrates what I believe is one of the best descriptions of disease. This is from Ellen White. It says, disease is the effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. That's what disease is. It's your body trying to deal with what you've done wrong. And that's what blood pressure is. So let me give you a further example. Because sometimes blood pressure really is essential. You need high blood pressure. Let me explain what I mean. Our brains, our hearts, our organs, they all need a certain amount of blood every hour, every minute, every day. Now, if those arteries get narrower because they're filled with plaques of fat and cholesterol, your brain still needs the same amount of blood. So how do you get the same amount of blood through a narrow tube? You have to push it faster. If you push it faster, the only way to do that is to raise your blood pressure, to push it faster, to make your heart beat faster. That is one of the conditions. So if you then start to remove that plaque by a healthy lifestyle, your blood pressure starts to come down, your risk starts to come down. And that is done with a healthy plant-based diet. And, you know, I would say that the key to high blood pressure, the food that I would recommend the most are greens. The darker, the better. The darker, the better. What they're able to do, they're able to cause your arteries to open up because they have a natural ingredient in them called nitric oxide. Now, nitric oxide, by the way, is the active ingredient of a drug called Viagra. Silence. Okay, nobody's ever heard of the drug Viagra, obviously. But that is the drug used for erectile dysfunction, for those of you who don't know. So greens contain the natural ingredient that will open up your arteries and allow you to have blood flowing to your brain and everywhere in your body. In fact, I hear lots of people say to me, Dr. Chidi, especially the men, Dr. Chidi, yeah, I do want to get healthy, I do want to lower my blood pressure, but don't give me rabbit food, please. Well, the one thing I know about rabbits is that they do not need Viagra. I'm going to move on. Okay, fantastic. In fact, let me say this, because erectile dysfunction is a very important point. And for the men in the audience, and even your wives or everything, please listen. When you get one episode of erectile dysfunction, one episode, your risk of having a stroke or a heart attack increases to 1 in 4 in the next 5 years. I'll repeat that. So if you have one episode of erectile dysfunction, you have a 25% chance of having a heart attack or a stroke in the next 5 years. So when you get that episode, don't just go for the pill. What you should do is go for reversing that disease so that you will improve your blood flow throughout your body. Fantastic. Now, you can't talk about blood pressure without talking a bit about exercise. I will be dealing with more exercise later in the week. And the truth is, you should exercise, but do the best exercise you can. Do the exercise that you enjoy the most. I would say, though, if you have high blood pressure, you shouldn't do strenuous exercise. No weight training, no strenuous running, walking, swimming, cycling is absolutely fine, because it will peak your blood pressure if you do too much exercise. So just go for a walk every day, at least for an hour. That is the way you can reverse your high blood pressure. So let's go back to where we began. You know, this was a very wise man, Solomon, when he came up with the idea, and he said, above all things, guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it springs the issues of life. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, that is a profound statement. That's a profound statement. Because the thing that issues out of your heart is your blood. And it's telling us there that the thing that issues out of our heart is life. You know, we didn't know in the world until 1624, when William Harvey discovered the function of blood. That stuff that came out of the heart, he realized, gives life to the tissues. That's the first time we realized that. People have been dying in battle, bleeding for centuries, but we didn't know what blood did. He discovered it. But back there, Solomon told us the function of blood. But there's something more interesting about this statement. Guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it flows the issues of life. What it's really telling us is that the issues in our lives do not come from our neighbors. They don't come from my spouse. They don't come from my work. They come from my own heart. Oh yes, I may be surrounded by stresses. I may be surrounded by people who seek to do me harm. But the determination as to whether it affects my body, my mind, or my spirit is my own choice. It comes from my own heart. So if we really want to guard our hearts physically, absolutely, we can do that with the diet and the lifestyle. We will be talking about stress and depression later in the week, or probably next week. But if we really want to guard our hearts, what we're really going to have to do is take time to forgive, to understand, to let go of issues that are causing us stress beyond belief. We're going to be talking more about that throughout the week. Look, I'm going to be doing actually consultations this week. Tuesday and Thursday this week, I'm going to be here between the hours of 2 and 4, and we're opening it up for anybody to come with any problems that they have. I'm happy to do so. Now, some of you may be in Rwanda or Nigeria or South Africa. You may not be able to get here. I think you can see my details that you can contact me or follow on Twitter or Instagram, and you'll see lots of advice on how to combat many of the things that we're doing. Now, tomorrow you'll have the delightful Sister Finley. I will see you the day after. Have a good evening.